Look, everyone won't be wealthy, but everyone can be basically wealthy. Let's get it.
Right, all right. Now let's get into story mode, okay? I like telling
story
stories
time.
a little bit. It's story time. In getting in stories, I want to tell the story of a lady that overcame so much, and to me is really the definition of generational wealth. Okay, about not just overcoming adversity, but also defining what it is in real life to really have a plan to pass down wealth in the best way. So in the late 1700s, there was a young lady born, her name became Harriet. I'm not going to say her name was Harriet originally.
Okay.
I'm just going to say that her American name is Harriet, okay? And at 12 years old, she was living free over in Africa, West Africa, and then she was captured, kidnapped, and then taken over to Virginia, and then sold to the Quick family and shipped down to Bennettsville, South Carolina. Okay, so at 12 years old, she did know who she was. She knew about her culture. She had a home. So this isn't an infant. This is a person that was well aware of where they came from and was towards the end of the transatlantic slave trade brought over. I'm talking about on one of the last ships before it was outlawed illegally, let's call it, to transport an African from Africa to the United States. Remember, slavery wasn't abolished, but the transatlantic part of it was abolished before slavery was abolished in 1865. So she comes over, she's sold, and she's taken away from her family. She's starting a new life. And she's having to work hard. She works in the house and in the field. She's very good at what she does. She's actually applauded for what she does. And while she's on the plantation, she runs into a handsome black man named Aaron, okay? And her and Aaron kick it off, okay? So she has a new life that she's starting. She was taken from her home, now she's starting a new life. She starts to build a family with this man, Aaron, starts to have children. And then guess what? What happens again? She's taken from her family because Aaron is sold to another family, okay? See, and she, by the way, there's no happy ending when it comes to Aaron. She never saw Aaron again. This is her husband. It wasn't her boo thing. She started building a life with him and he was shipped out. She doesn't even know why. Okay, so once again, her family is broken. But this woman is resilient. She continues to work on the plantation. She continues to work at her crafts and the things that she's good at. And then as we know, in 1865, and this is when she's much older, she's probably more like in her 60s or so, we know that these slaves were freed. Okay, because of the Emancipation Proclamation. So the ratified article was in December of 1865. But even though she was free, she still, and her and her family still worked the land, even though they were free. And they continued to work the land. And in 1869, a life-changing event happened for Harriet Quick. Her former owner gave her 300 acres of land. Forget 40 acres and a mule. She got 300 acres of farmable land. Okay, so again, this is a woman, remember, started from being free, was captured, brought to a place she never knew of, right? Had built a relationship with a man, had a husband and a family, had that taken away. Built more, she ended up having about 13 kids, kept going, kept living, saw her freedom come back to her, and then gained 300 acres of land. And then what she did, the first thing she did with that land is she took a plot of it with her children and she built a church. And the church that she built was named Aaron Temple UMC. After her husband that she never saw again. After some of those kids, I know that was their father. I can't say it was the father of all the kids, but it was at least some of the kids. And that church, by the way, is still standing today, 150 plus years later. Wow. It's also, they have a cemetery there, which most of the family is still buried or their remains lay there, okay? Now, she lived to be 114 years old. She didn't die until about 1903, 1904. Okay, so you're talking about somebody who was born in the late 1700s, didn't die until 1903, 1904, right? But on her deathbed, she did write a will. And when she wrote out her will, of her 13 kids, 4 of those kids, and I don't know why, but 4 of them, she deeded all of that land to. She said, you can live there for your natural lives. You can use it for whatever purpose you can. But I have this one condition. and it's that you cannot sell that land. 150 years later, that land, for the most part, is still owned by the family. So when we talk about creating generational wealth, think about when I'm talking about a woman that was free as a child, taken from her homeland, had enough sense after everything she went through to still say, I've gained something great, and I want to make sure the kids and kids and kids and kids and kids after me hold on to this and never sell it. And it was such a great impression that those kids and kids and kids never sold that land. Still in Bennettsville, South Carolina, probably instead of 300, it might be like 250 because taxes got some of that out the way. You know how they try to, separate us from our stuff. They still own that property. And if that's not a story of generational wealth, I don't know. But here's the other fact. When I say it's Women's History Month, and I want to close it out with this part of history, she was the first African or, let's say, Black woman to own land in the county of Marlboro, South Carolina. Her name, again, is Harriet Quick. Now, I only learned about this story 5 years ago, but here's why this story also stands really closely to Uncle Joe, okay? The guy who speaks to y'all about Wealth Wednesday every Wednesday, likes to talk about financial literacy, likes to talk about generational wealth, right? Well, it turns out that that's my great-great-great-great-great-grandmother.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so when it comes to my family, we're talking about, this is the only family member that I know by name that literally came from the land, from the motherland, from Africa, and made it here. And that tradition was preserved. So I know exactly through the line I knew it's through my mother's line, but I know through my grandfather and his mother and his mother and mother and father, I know all the names that leads to me and my child. Without break. And mind you, I'm not one of, look, I ain't come from one of the four that got the land, all right? I don't have no land, all right? I'm just saying, I can go visit, but in that funeral, in that burial ground, the cemetery there, most of my from great-great-grandparents on are, buried there. So whenever I want to go visit, it's still a place I could take my son. And it's funny because, again, you had me all these years later talking about generational wealth. And I come from generational wealth in terms of the tradition, and I didn't even learn about that until 5 years ago. So it brings two things into importance. Number one, it's important to really let your people know who they are.
Absolutely.
I got to that same destination because I was destined to get there. It's just a part of what I speak about. Now, I can say it's tied to the bloodline. It's my great-great-great-great-great-grandmama, who was doing that too. But today we look for like quick fixes. We look for like crypto. We look for like stock choices. Sometimes it's just about setting the impression from the beginning. Sometimes it's about just keeping on, building slowly. And when you get something, really preserving it beyond yourself.
Right.
Because ultimately, I mean, first of all, for her to live 114 years is amazing.
Right.
And then when you think about it, when I added the numbers up, the years that she was free almost equaled the years she was captive.
Wow.
Because she lived so long.
Right.
But to know that, and I know she would be proud, and this is why she gets all the applause from me today, that your great-great-great-grandchildren, not myself, but the ones that are taking care of that land, still held on to that promise and have no plans on selling it. It doesn't matter if it's millions. It don't matter if what it can do, what it can produce. That promise still got held. And within the family, though a lot has been lost, that wealth has been maintained.
And that's so important because, like you said, preserving it beyond yourself. And you don't know how many stories of people that work and bend over backwards and toil for decades towards a legacy for their families, to preserve beyond themselves. And then, it may go down to a child, who it goes down to a grandchild that maybe that legacy wasn't embedded in them the way that it should have been. They don't see the importance, may come across some financial issues and troubles, maybe poor money managers. There's all types of things. But, you see legacies that get disrupted because it doesn't always get passed down to the proper person to maintain the legacy. So, along with what she was able to do herself within her lifetime, just the way that they embedded that legacy. To withhold and stand throughout the generations. Amazing.
And here's the part that with that I just really appreciate. It's that we can't learn that in history books. I couldn't learn that in school. all I had to do was, and I've been doing this for the last like 10 years, 15 years really, just talk to and know who my family is. Know who you come from. Because look, because I learned that story 5 years ago, guess what? Lathan has known that, my son, his whole life. So you know where you come from, son. You come from this, that, this, and the other. I can tell you directly where they are. We can go visit. I can tell you, not that, look, you didn't inherit this, but understand you're a part of this, and this was the example that's set.
Right.
You know, I couldn't get that story growing up, but I eventually got it. And it shows the importance of us within family just sharing stories. I had to really do some research and dig deep, because obviously my last name is not Quick.
Right.
But I know which one of my grandparents' maiden names was Quick.
Right.
So I know exactly where it came from. And then it's easier for my Lorick last name. Like you said, I've been to South Carolina. Remember I told you guys that my family came up here from South Carolina. So on my mother's side, you had that story. And on my father's side, literally, I can go back to Lorick Plantation, which I've been at. I've been to the house. I've been to the land. I'm planning on purchasing that land at some point, but we'll get into that later.
Okay, Lorick.
Hey, I'm not playing. But then also, when it came to, I told you I took that recent trip to Africa. A big part of that was kind of in my own way saying, look, I can't answer for your hundreds, okay? I'm just one of hundreds of great grandkids that you have living today. But I can say that at least one made it back to where you came from. You know what I mean? Got to see it. So it's like you didn't get to go back, but we got back. You know what I mean? So it's about taking it much further. Now, and the other thing is adding on to what she did. There are those in the family who can take care of those 300 acres or that 250 or whatever it is. But how about let's try to add another 300?
Right.
Let's try to add another 250. Instead of just maintaining what was done, let's take it that much further. But you're only going to be able to take it much further by knowing that it was done.
Right.
So when it comes to this thing about generational wealth, sometimes for us, it's not about coming up with millions and passing it down. Sometimes we just need to pass down the history.
Right, the legacy.
The legacy, because that history, look, we always hear the history and the legacy of ones that mess up. You know what I mean? You hear about the drunk uncle, you hear about the person that wasn't supposed to be touching somebody, you know, Rolling Stone and all that existed. But within all our families, I guarantee you have a story of generational wealth. Seek to find it, do what you need to do to research it, get through the pain, because the wealth that will come from that will allow you to empower the next generation with this is where you come from, instead of a story that everybody else tells you about yourself and your family.
Okay, and you know, Uncle Joe, that's a motivation for you too, because like you said, out of the hundreds, you may have been one of the only ones to get back, but that shows the power of one, because that leaves the power in your hands to add another 300 if that's what you want to do.
Oh, you know that. Absolutely. You know me, this Uncle Joe, I got to get more now.
Okay.
and also to kind of discover that financial wisdom is in your DNA.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's like I ain't even have a choice. I've been doing this for 15 years and I'm like, man, I had somebody in my bloodline that started that a long time ago. I was never told that. Like I said, I didn't start this after learning about it. I was already doing it.
Right.
But the fact was, hey, sometimes you just meant to do what you meant to do.
Wow.
And it's in your DNA. You do things and don't even always know why you're doing it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So shout out to my great grandma for Women's History Month, and also shout out to the Quick family down in South Carolina family, all my cousins, and all of them down there holding it down. I'm gonna be back down there to check everything out, to see the church, to visit the burial ground and pay my respects. Like I said, I've been back to South Carolina before, but I'm certainly just showing them love because they are the ones that also maintained that promise and did the work. Hey, look, when I come down there, I tell them I ain't looking for nothing. You know, when somebody come from, hey, I was part of the family. Where my part? Look, Uncle Joe don't want no check. I get my own checks. However, I appreciate the legacy. Much love to y'all. And again, a happy Women's History Month. Look, we've been making history. Women been making history for a long time. We should always acknowledge it. And I wanted to make sure to close out this month with a true story, not from the books, but from my own family.
Wow.
Okay, man, that's, the legacy of Harriet Quick, and it's actually one of your cousins on here, Marty Quick, that is on Facebook, that is actually helping to share her story. So this is a big deal. Legacy.
Oh, yeah, Marty a preacher too. I know exactly who you're talking about, Marty Quick. He was one of the first people I found when I started looking into the family, him and his siblings who keep things very active and tell a story on a regular basis.
All right, shout out to that. I love that legacy, generational Generational Wealth, Uncle Joe. Make sure you follow him at Joseph Lorick. That's JosepHLorick. Make sure you follow him. And of course, he's here each and every Wednesday for Wealth Wednesdays. And we just appreciate everything that you bring to the table. His views are not the views of WEAA and Morgan State specifically, but we love everything you have to say. That's why you're here every Wednesday. So we appreciate you, man. And everybody, make sure you follow. It is 9:38. Good morning, Baltimore.